Hi everyone, and welcome to the AITD webinar series for 2017. I'm Neil von Hoopt, the Programs Manager, and if you're looking for a webinar on virtual classrooms, then you're in the right place. I actually get to do two introductions today. It's been 3 months of anticipation, and it was formally announced yesterday that AITD has a new CEO, Naomi Dinnan. Naomi has an extensive experience in the learning and development profession, and we're looking forward to her leadership of our association. This webinar series ties in with the current national conversation on digital learning, and that's a perfect segue to thank our production partners at Redback. They have a fabulous platform for hosting digital events like webinars, webcasts, and video conferencing, and they're a fabulous bunch of people to work with. I'm going to go back a slide actually, because there was something important on there, which is our Twitter handle at AITD1 and the hashtag for the webinar series, which is hashtag AITDwebinar. If you're on Twitter, make sure you use those handle and hashtag, because Joe, our communications manager, will be tweeting throughout the webinar as well. So make sure you're using the hashtag there. So let me go forwards again. There's two ways that you can actually chat today. So over on the side, we have the usual chat box, and a few of you have been in there already, which is great. But for today as well, we have the option of actually dialing in and asking questions via the telephone. So we are going to be using a few extra tools today, and you will have an option as we go through to actually kind of type onto the screen at one point. So down the bottom left-hand side of your screen, there's a little orange figure. And if you click on that, it will bring up the list that you can see on the screen at the moment. If you've dialed in via the phone, which is what you need to do first, then you can raise your hand on that, and either Cheryle or Cassandra, who's working furiously in the background, will see that, and at the right time, we'll connect you through to Cheryle and you can ask your questions there. If you are having trouble hearing with the audio straight over your computer, you can dial in and listen via your telephone. Just dial in on the number that's there and enter the passcode that's on the screen, and that details in the confirmation email that you would have received about that email as well. So we are here to talk about virtual classrooms, okay? And we are here to listen to not me, but the lovely Cheryle Walker. Now Cheryle is one of Australia's leading proponents of virtual classroom, and it's so good to have you here today, Cheryle. She actually ran a sold-out session on virtual classrooms at our 2017 National Conference, and we're totally looking forward to your input today. So I'm going to get out of the way and let you do your thing and hand it over to you, and I will be back on again at the end. Thanks, Cheryle.
Terrific. Thank you, Neil, and thank you for the indulgence of appearing on webcam as well. I like to do this at the start of my virtual classrooms, just to wave at people and let them know I'm real. I do have my glamour shot as well on my slide to introduce myself. So I've met some of you before, I know at AITD events, and that's been lovely, so I see some familiar names on the participant list there. As you know, I'm mad passionate about virtual classrooms, and that's what I love doing. So let's hop in and have some conversations about virtual classrooms. It's a fast and furious webinar, and I'm going to try some experimental things with you, so please participate. Please participate and ask questions specifically. Like you to be able to use the chat panel throughout, or use that raised hand button at any time. I don't mind if you interrupt. I'll check for any raised hands in the names there, and I want to be able to answer your questions as we go along. So let's make this nice and interactive. We're going to have a poll to begin, just to get us doing something and keep you engaged. So, Cassie, if you can just launch that first poll for us. We're running virtual classrooms. I want to know about your virtual classrooms. Are you running them regularly? So if you can choose one of these options, either regularly, sometimes, rarely, or not at all. And we should be able to see the results coming up there as they're happening. See a few people still not at all running webinar, virtual classrooms. That's okay. Hopefully I can teach you something that might help you move down that track if you want to. And I'm assuming, given that you've come along to the webinar today, you are interested in running virtual classrooms. So we've got a few people sometimes, some regularly. Excellent. That's interesting. It's interesting, 50% of you not running them at all. All right, I hope I can help out with that. So do ask your questions so I can help out. I will close that poll, so thank you for having a go at that and voting in that. And that gives me an idea of who we've got online. The next question I usually ask people is why virtual classrooms? What do you think virtual classrooms can solve for you and what they won't solve for you? So I'll put this in the chat panel now. What can VCs solve for you? And could you put some thoughts in the chat panel there? What can VCs solve? And we'll pop those onto the flip chart on the screen here as you bring some of those through, some of those ideas. What do you think they're going to solve for your organisation? Feel free to raise your hand if you want to respond verbally as well. Geographical disbursement, yes, definitely. Minimising travel costs, yes. And indeed catering costs too. We don't cater so much expensively, so great. Thanks for you guys who are putting those on the whiteboard there. Remote access issues, good one, Donna. More efficient access to our stakeholders, yes, Helen. Louisa's got a really good one too there, training on applications and systems to remote audiences. Yeah, so applications and systems, you don't need to have a computer lab to be able to train those. As long as people can log in to the webinar software or the virtual classroom software, then you can easily display any applications and systems and teach those. Donna's got another good one there too, no waste of time with travel. From Loretta, accessibility across various branches and concentrate on the slow learner. That's an interesting one. Lovely. Save on presenter travel. Okay. Linda wants to raise a hand, but that's okay. Did you want to have a chat, Linda? Can we unmute Linda and see if Linda wants to ask a question? So there is, if you're looking for the raised hand button, right down the bottom left corner, there's a little person symbol. If you click on that, and up comes a little panel where you can raise a hand if you need to.
A side note as well for everyone, if you'd like to speak into the webinar and raise your hand, you will have to dial in as well.
Thanks, Cassie. Thanks for letting me know. So you have to be on the telephone for us to be able to hear you. Thanks for letting us know. All right, some really good ideas, and I can see a lot of similar ideas coming through on what VCs can solve. So what I'm going to do now is type in what VCs won't solve. So I'll just pop that in the chat panel. Where's my S? There we go. There we go. Can you put in some ideas of what VCs won't solve? So it's a good idea to get clear in our mind about what virtual classrooms are good for and what we can't necessarily solve with them. Let's be realistic. Any ideas or thoughts here? I did this one at the conference as well, if anybody was at the conference workshop, and got some really interesting insights. Networking during class time. Ian, I'd like to challenge you on that one. I think we can network in virtual classrooms, certainly not in webinars where it's one-way audio only. But I'm going to talk about networking and collaborative learning very shortly. Subject matter that needs observation. Yes, Loretta, we've only got a very small webcam if we need to show something, so some things need to be face-to-face. Soft skills, role plays are difficult. Linda can't type onto the screen. That's okay, Linda. We've got someone scribing on the screen, so that's all right. Type your ideas in the chat panel and we'll still pick up on them. Course links, the same, says Barbara, no saving time. Yeah, that can be a design challenge. You might need to set some self-paced or what I call inter-session assignments in between virtual classroom sessions if you want to be able to save time. David said people sleeping through training. I've got some tricks I can stop people sleeping through training, or at least I can know who's sleeping or who's left the computer. The human touch, yes. Wow, this chat panel's going frantic, so thanks for all your ideas. Sorry I can't read them all out. Internet speed, says Helen, can be technology limitations. Feedback, group work, yes, and we can do group work and breakout rooms and role plays, and that's what I teach. So there's a lot of things there we can do. And yeah, I'd like to challenge some of these. So participating in practical activities, definitely we can mostly, unless it's involving equipment, you know, that we can't have while we're sitting in front of a computer. Building rapport and relationships, I think, can also be done in the virtual classroom. And that's why most often when I run virtual classrooms, I keep lower numbers than like in a webinar like this, and I have people speaking through their telephone or computer as well, so that we're sharing ideas. So it's not only one voice, it's a group discussion. Alrighty, thank you for that. That's a lot of really good ideas, and it gives me an idea of your thinking and your challenges, and that's what I want to be able to help you with. Yeah, and Louise, a good final point there, face-to-face interaction is more important in some cultures, definitely. All right, so I think if you're looking at doing virtual classrooms within your organisation, it is good to get realistic about why you would want to do them and what they can solve and what they can't with the audience you've got and with the technology challenges you've got and with the programs that you run. So I'll just give some summary here of some of the reasons why organisations do virtual classrooms, and some of these you've brought out. So there is that geographically dispersed learners and global reach. Consistency is another one. If we want consistency of training and we only have a small number of trainers or a small number of facilitators or subject matter experts, we can reach a wide audience through virtual classrooms rather than having them on the road all the time travelling. Sometimes it's about cost effectiveness or facilitator utilisation, so that idea of how much are our facilitators where they should be with learners as opposed to on the road travelling. So we can take them off the road and get them face-to-face with learners or face-to-face online with learners. Flexible and modular learning and modularising or chunking learning. So Barbara had a thought in the chat panel earlier about you can't reduce course time. A lot of the time you can't reduce course time, but sometimes you can chunk it down into shorter virtual classrooms, which allows for spaced learning. We're talking about spaced learning a fair bit these days as well, and the value of that. You can space it out a bit more and run more frequent virtual classrooms across a period of time. Whereas when you tend to get people together face-to-face, you tend to have them for the whole day because you don't want them travelling to and fro too many times. We can create more blended learning options, so using a variety of technologies, a variety of channels and modalities when we use virtual classrooms. I've used virtual classrooms as well purely for communication and help desk, so assisting some of that learning transfer back into the workplace by getting people to hop online. I can show them something quickly or refresh or troubleshoot or problem solve. Apologies for some of my text here going in strange places over here. I've used mistakenly used a text which is a custom text font, which is not showing up too well on some of these slides, but never mind. For training providers, I've found that virtual classrooms can provide additional revenue and additional markets for them. So whereas people might not travel to attend your training, come in to see you at Sydney, Melbourne, wherever you are to do your training, they might hook up virtually and pay for training through virtual classrooms. So that's a couple of benefits or whys that are relevant for training providers. Here's what I like to do to distinguish between different types of virtual events. So you'll see the higher numbers we get, the more we're focusing on a different purpose. So in this event, we've got probably more than 50 people. I know there was a larger number of 50 registered to attend this event now. So we're really building interest. It's what I call a virtual conference or a virtual broadcast event. We've got a mass of people and the purpose is to build interest. We're not going to get in and do role plays and do skills practice and things like that in an event of this size. If I'm running virtual classrooms where I do want to build in a high amount of interactivity and want people to be hands-on and challenge them to physically do something, then I would keep the numbers down to around 4 to 15, and that size of group is what I call a circle. It's a small circle of people learning together, and we are workshopping. We're actually doing the work of learning. So it's important to be realistic about the number of people you have in a virtual event and what you can potentially achieve, and that helps you define your virtual classrooms or events as well. So that's a little peekaboo at that. Feel free to pop any questions in the chat panel. I noticed the chat panel's gone a bit quiet, but you're welcome to type away in there and I will notice your question and answer that for you. Or as we say, if you are on the telephone, you can raise your hand as well, and don't worry about interrupting me anytime to raise a hand. I want to be able to answer your questions as we go through. We do have question time at the end, but sometimes you've got a burning question partway through. Actually, there's my slide. This reminds me to pause sometimes in my virtual classroom and see if people have got any questions about what I'm presenting rather than waiting until the end. Okay, so I can't see any raised hands at this point in time, but as I say, I'll keep my eye on that chat panel and feel free to type in a question. I will notice if you do at any point in time. Now another question, oh look at my slides, we didn't test these slides did we in the session beforehand. How do you know if virtual classrooms are successful, that's supposed to say? So can we get some thoughts in the chat panel? How do you know if your virtual classrooms are successful? And this might be a tricky one given that we've got 50% of you not running virtual classrooms at all at this point in time, but for those of you who are. I've got Simone in the chat panel there. Are there any free platforms you would recommend for running virtual classrooms? The number one free one that I'm recommending at the moment, and look, none of these I'm advertising for, but Zoom. Take a look at Zoom. It's got a low level of subscription at the lower level as well. So Zoom's a good one to take a look at. It's emerging. Timeframe says, and virtual learning appears to cover more than face-to-face. Why is that? I think, Anne, we need to be high energy and high impact and covering a lot of content in virtual to keep people's attention. I also do think that some people try to cram too much into virtual classrooms, and it is all the presenter speaking and participants don't get a voice. I think we also try to condense time too much. So we bring them down to 30-minute or 60-minute sessions and then expect to be able to plough through a whole lot of content. That can be a mistake. I would tend to say it still depends on purpose. So come back to your purpose. If your purpose is high interactivity and engagement, then have lower numbers in the virtual classroom and take it a bit slower. Give people time to digest and try something out and have a chat. So Elizabeth is saying engagement, such as the chat panel, can be one way of knowing if your virtual classrooms are successful. Yes. David said a post-class competency assessment, and Louise has got the same idea. Ian as well, similar on feedback forms. Engaging with the presenter, feedback. Getting re-enrollment in future ones. Thanks, Liz. That's a good one. Request for more VCs. Okay, I'll add to you some of your ideas as we go through this presentation. Here's some ideas I've had in terms of success factors for live online learning. So you'll see on the screen here, sometimes it's about cost saving, and it's important to measure that you would not have been able to deliver as much learning had you not had the virtual classroom functionality to get out to that dispersed audience. Sometimes it's about speed to competence. You can reach a larger audience in a quicker time with virtual classrooms than you can get someone to travel around and deliver a whole lot of face-to-face training. We talked about level of engagement. Flexibility and agility are really important. That's what technology allows us to do. I can talk to all of you today, whereas you may not have all been able to come to a venue where I could be at today. Embedding learning in the workplace. I like this one, particularly for organisations where computers are part of the daily work. Then we are bringing the learning to your desk when we're doing virtual classrooms. Yeah, Neil's got a good point. The success factors can seem to be low-level reaction learning. What about impact, delivering business outcomes? We're going to come to that a little bit later. But I tend to look at quality and consistency. So if we're measuring things that are quantitative, like numbers of people attending or ratings as to how interesting and engaging it was, they tend to be low-level reaction type of things. I would like to look at measuring things like quality and consistency of training and collaborative learning, which we're going to be talking about as well, which are higher level learning concepts so we can measure the impact that virtual classrooms had online. So it's really important when you're looking at success factors. This webinar is about setting up virtual classrooms for success. Think about for your organisation, what are the right success factors, and come back to that why. If we're doing this purely to reduce the cost of training, then let's measure that. Cost of training is a success factor. Think about how you're going to measure that. So you might compare how many virtual classrooms you ran for what cost against if you had to typically run those at a hired training venue, how much would that have cost, together with facilitated travel and so forth. If your success factor is geographic disbursement, how many learners were you able to reach in a 1-month training period, for example, and how would that compare if you had to travel around and try and reach that number? You wouldn't have been able to reach that same number of learners or have that same number of learners go through a program if you were doing face-to-face. So it is about the why are you doing virtual classrooms and then measuring those whys to see if you are having success. And really important, this one down here, how are you going to report these? Create a good dashboard. Visual dashboards are great for learning metrics. And to whom? Who needs to hear this good news about what virtual classrooms are doing in your organisation? And now I also want to say at this point in time, I get wildly enthusiastic about virtual classrooms, but we're not saying we're throwing out face-to-face learning, not at all. What we're doing is augmenting. So with that geographic disbursement, for example, we're reaching more learners than we could face-to-face. So there might be, while I don't like to create the virtual classroom as the poor cousin option. I do sometimes say that, you know, if you can come or have budget to come to a face-to-face event, that's great. If you can't, and sometimes it's not always about budget, sometimes it's about we can't travel or leave home, we have caring responsibilities, or just too busy schedule to be able to come to training, then you can come to the virtual version and still interact with the subject matter experts and still get some support with your learning. So really important for you to define your success factors, think about how you're going to measure it, and how will you report on these and to whom, and do that before you run your virtual events, obviously. How important is collaborative learning? This one says, and sorry, the slides aren't translating well into this platform, but collaborative learning is about learning from others, not only the facilitator or presenter. So I've got another poll on this one. Can we launch that poll, Cassie, just to get a pulse check from our people online? How important is collaborative learning in your organisation? So it's either very important up there or not important at all. Let's have a look at some of these numbers coming through. Yeah, everybody's up on 1 or 2 at the moment. A few people there in the not defined or measured, so you may not be talking about the value of collaborative learning in your organisation. Okay. Or you may not have a strong understood definition of collaborative learning. So collaborative learning in a simpler form, as I said, is learning from others, not only the facilitator or the presenter. And some of you have alluded to that in the chat panel, that you didn't think virtual classrooms could solve that one, that you couldn't have interaction or discussion between participants. We can do that if we keep our numbers realistic and we have long enough to actually delve into discussion with participants. In this short session, we won't do too much collaborative learning, but at least a poll is one quick way of pulse checking. And the chat panel is another way we can share ideas. Okay, so I can see we've got most people saying very important, about 57% saying no, very important, some people somewhat important. I'll close that poll now, so thank you for that. This is what Josh Burson says about collaborative learning. It's a quick quote from Josh. And he says that we remember far more of what we learn when we get into discussion and interaction. And so this is what I very much like to promote in virtual classrooms, that we do have a discussion and interaction, we learn from each other. And when I think about globally dispersed audiences in organisations, imagine how much you can learn in virtual classrooms if you are hooked up with other learners from other parts of the globe or from other parts of your organisation that you don't normally work with. They're not in the same office as you, so you're not normally chatting to these people. If you have a well-designed virtual classroom and a good facilitator, then you can have some great conversations around your organisation within the virtual classroom, within the learning medium. Remember that the learning medium is not all about the presenter and their knowledge. So when you're defining your success factors, if collaborative learning is important for you, one of the ways you could measure this is to survey your learners, and this was coming through in the chat panel before as well, this suggestion. Ask your learners, how much did you learn from or interact with others in the session, in the virtual classroom session? Now, if you're going to measure that, obviously you need to design your sessions so that they do have the opportunity for lots of interaction with others. Breakout rooms is one great way of doing that. We find that when we put the people into breakout rooms in smaller groups, just like face-to-face, you divide them into groups of 4 or 5 or even into pairs in the virtual classroom, then they're more accountable to do the work of discussing things with each other. And without the facilitator present, they're probably more likely to share some of their thoughts and ideas, even their fears and their challenges or hesitations. So think about designing your virtual classrooms for interaction between participants. Okay, once again, happy to answer any of your questions if they come through in the chat panel. I am keeping my eye on that. Other things we can look for if we're going to evaluate virtual classrooms on this measure of collaborative learning, some other examples of things that we're going to look for. We're going to look for informal conversations that were generated from participation in the virtual classroom. My virtual classrooms are about generating conversation, about generating ideas, about generating behaviour change in the workplace. So my virtual classrooms are not designed with a whole lot of content that I'm just pushing, because if I was doing that, I could do something self-paced. I could possibly create a piece of e-learning or a video that gives you information and content. The idea of getting together live is that we do generate conversations, ideas, and potential behaviour changes through just interacting together as a varied set of employees or participants in an organisation. So we need to look for examples of evidence of this, and we need to design our virtual classroom so we've got the opportunity to do this. Another one there is new ideas born out of the virtual classroom, connections and interactions. So people meeting each other they might not have met otherwise. And I'd like to be able to do that today a bit more. We've got a large number there, but feel free to do that in the chat panel network with anybody who you've met today on this session. Collective ownership of learning goals and outcomes should also be part of collaborative learning in the virtual classroom. So, for example, I want to see people doing individual self-assessment of their tasks. I want to set them a learning task within the virtual classroom and then get them to openly and honestly assess how well they did that task or what their challenges will be. And leading on to action planning after the virtual classroom, what are you going to have to practice or do differently in your workplace in order to increase this skill? And this can be different for everyone. Every adult learner comes to the learning opportunity with different experience and different needs in some ways. And this is a really key critical one that I often have conversations with my stakeholders about, is that virtual classrooms are prioritised over work. So when commitment is prior, in other words, people have signed up and opted in to go to a virtual classroom, they need to be prioritised over work, and managers need to give sufficient time to the participant to participate fully. So a lot of the time we run virtual classrooms, or I hear from my stakeholders at least, that a lot of time they run virtual classrooms and people are trying to multitask. They're kind of logged in, but they're still continuing doing their work. I work with some of the banks in virtual classrooms, and they struggle to get time off the counter, or their branch manager hasn't allocated them time off the counter. They've said, yes, you can go to that virtual classroom, but you've still got to keep an eye out in case a customer comes in. That's not dedicating or prioritising time for learning. So if we're really going to get into collaborative learning, we do need to measure this one, whether our business, our organisation is being serious about the virtual classrooms and really allocating time to them. And if not, we need to have some conversations with them about why that is. So I'm just going to have a look at the chat panel here because we've got some interesting thoughts coming through. Yes, Louise had a good one there. First up, that prioritisation of virtual classrooms over work is a big advantage over self-paced. It is, Louise, yes, because we can have some attention of the learner. We know when they're paying attention or not in the virtual classrooms, whereas when we put self-paced learning out there, we're not quite sure what happens with that self-paced learning in the workplace. Simone says they're planning to hold our virtual classroom for 3 full days in a row to complete a training package. Wow, that's going to be high time online. A lot of content to get through, but we also want to facilitate discussion. I think it will be a significant challenge. Yeah, Simone, I do teach people how to run virtual conferences, what I call virtual conferences, where you have several virtual classrooms over a day or 2 or 3 day period. Important to have breaks in between. Important to get them doing something, stepping up and away and doing something in between. Give them a task to go and scavenge hunt or find out or research or reflect on in between those virtual classroom sessions. Elizabeth's got a great question in there which speaks right to the work that I do. Do virtual facilitators need different skills to a face-to-face facilitator? Definitely, quite a different skill set, and I'll talk about that in a little while as well. The optimum session time you suggest for a virtual session, thanks Dean for that question. I can say around about the middle is about 90 minutes. It's long enough to explore some subject matter and to have a go, to get hands-on and have a go in a 90-minute session. You've got enough time to do 1 round of breakout rooms and get them doing something and to debrief that. So if we think of how we really learn, it's not just logging in and getting a whole lot of slides and an information push. That is part of learning, but it's also then being able to question, being able to have a go, have a discussion with other participants about how they're finding the skill sets and what they're going to do differently, and perhaps having a skills practice and then debriefing on that. How did that go, and what am I going to do differently next time, and so forth, and having some time to reflect on the information that we've learnt as well. So not all about information push. So around 90 minutes I think is good. However, I do run virtual events anywhere from 30 minutes to, well, up to 3 days, which is what Simone was saying as well. It's a matter of design then and getting the rhythm right. You need a rhythm which is a combination of I learn or find out something, then I get a chance to have a go, then I get a chance to reflect on how my practice went. Then I get to debrief that, and then I can start looking at another new skill or piece of information as well. So that's all in the design. There's a lot to learn about design for virtual classroom that we can do. Look at my slide. Apologies for this text. I've used a custom font, which is not working here. But anyway, the question is, are you designing for collaborative learning in the virtual classroom? Or are you relying on a bunch of materials, say PowerPoint slides, that have been prepared for communication purposes? So too often I find people approach the virtual classroom with a bunch of PowerPoint slides which have got a whole lot of bullet points on, and they're just going to talk through those. And really, I think you could have made a video about that, or you could have sent that out and people could have read through it self-paced. So while it is important to relay some information in a virtual classroom, I talk about that rhythm, getting to the point where you give some information, but then you're going to either allow questions, allow discussion, or indeed do some skills practice. And that could be in breakout rooms or not, or it could be whiteboarding like we were doing before. Yeah, there's a reason why they call them bullet points that kill your presentation. Thanks, Neil. Perfect point. All right, here's some of the lessons that I've learned about running virtual classrooms over the period of time that I've set these up with a number of different organisations. Number one lesson is web conferencing software alone will not produce successful outcomes. Your web conferencing software is a very important choice because it's about functionality, it's about budget, it's about technology compatibility, bandwidth, network, all of that kind of gear, very important. But it's not the only thing you need to do. So don't stop up and think, okay, we've chosen our web conferencing platform, now we're set to go with virtual classrooms. That's not going to produce you successful outcomes. You require virtual classroom specialist expertise to ensure success. So you need to know all about the environment. It's a bit like if you were going to go and make a movie, a blockbuster Hollywood movie. You don't just need to find a camera to film the thing. You actually need a fair bit more expertise on storyboarding, on producing, on choosing the right skills that go into that movie, on on the whole theatre of it. So when it comes to virtual classrooms, we do need new design skills to be able to storyboard a virtual classroom with those collaborative learning elements sprinkled through, and what I call creating a rhythm that works and keeps people highly engaged in the virtual classroom. And number 4 there, we also need new facilitation skills. Our facilitators need to feel comfortable and confident in this technology environment to be just as good a learning facilitator as they are face-to-face. So to be able to produce an engaging and interactive virtual classroom, our facilitators need a new skill set, and that was one of the questions that was asked earlier in the chat panel. All right, so that's a whole nother area. We could run a whole nother series of virtual classrooms or webinars. So let me come back to metrics, setting up for success in the virtual classroom. I've got some thoughts on 6 essential metrics for virtual classrooms. So this is coming back to what's the success factor and how will we measure it? First one here is, and this is starting from the low level, and we're going to go up higher and talk about higher levels of success. So attendance and participation rate is really important. When it comes to virtual classrooms, you can start to analyse things like those that were invited or registered versus those who attended. So your percentage show up, because this is different from face-to-face. I think people feel a bit more like they can fly under the radar and not show up when it's a virtual classroom than when it's face-to-face. They feel like it'll be more noticeable if they don't turn up. So this is a good one to measure and report. Or if it's an opt-in, so sign up or opt-in versus the possible audience. In other words, if you invited or had a potential audience of 25 people to come to a virtual classroom and only 10 said, yes, that sounds interesting, I'd like to attend, that's something different again to measure. So that's about their perceptions of the value of the virtual classroom. So this one, first one, is about they've given a commitment to attend, but then at the last minute gone, oh, there's something more important, or I just don't feel like I need to go. This one is then about whether I'm actually attracted to the virtual classroom option. Neil's got a good point. The world is run by those who show up. Yes, beware what you might miss out if you don't show up. Number 2 here, a really important one to measure, is your technology reliability. So particularly in the early days, and if some of you haven't done virtual classrooms at all, I know that's a fair few of you on the session, it's good to test and pilot different technologies in conjunction with your IT support to see what works and what doesn't. And things that you can measure and report on are the percentage of successful connections or sessions, and any reported issues that were not solved. So what were they? Were they audio issues? Were they bandwidth issues, network? You know, get to solving those before you go broadband, or before you go broader in your organisation with virtual classrooms. Solve those issues and have some answers for them. Otherwise, yeah, if too many people have difficulty with the technology, they switch off, don't they? And they say, oh, we tried that once and it didn't work. So you don't want to get those sorts of bad experiences. You want to do that early in pilots, get those things ironed out. Overall satisfaction, and some people are calling this Net Promoter Score now. We're borrowing that from our marketing people. So how likely are you to recommend this learning experience to a colleague? This can be really important for virtual classrooms as well, because we know virtual classroom is a different learning experience to being face-to-face. And so we do want to focus on getting a good Net Promoter Score out of virtual classrooms. And I know organisations who are doing this now, who are getting great Net Promoter Scores from their virtual classrooms, because they've spent the time on design and the time on upskilling their facilitators to do a really good job and to make it interactive, engaging and worthwhile for participants. The next one here, relevance and learning transfer. So how relevant was the training to your role or your work challenges? This is similar to what you would also measure for face-to-face learning, and how much of what you learned will you use in your work. So knowledge or skill transfer. Really important for virtual classrooms, just as face-to-face. Next level up, collaborative learning, which is what I've been talking about. So the question, how much did you learn from or interact with others in the session? And if that's very low, you need to go back and redesign your virtual classrooms or assist your facilitators to get the collaboration happening in the virtual classroom. And you want to see examples and evidence of commitment and engagement to this type of learning. So it's about how much commitment and engagement is about how interesting, how powerful your virtual classrooms are for your learners as learner experiences, and that's up to you when it comes to design and facilitation. And trust, this is the one I'm going to finish off on actually in a couple of moments. Trust in virtual classrooms is at the core of this, I believe. So a mature and qualitative measure of virtual classroom adoption in an organisation is how much we trust. And here's what I mean by trust. We need our leaders and managers to trust that the learning will be worth the time invested by the staff. So you can go out and survey your leaders and managers with what level of trust they place in virtual classrooms. You can do that with quantitative measures, get them to indicate on a scale, or you can do it with qualitative measures. You can get some feedback. So this is getting at that heart of the idea that, oh yes, my people do those virtual classrooms, but I still have them, you know, with one eye on the counter to serve a customer if the customer comes in. Because I don't really trust that those virtual classrooms are highly engaging. They just need to log in and make sure that they're ticked off and that they've been there. And you can kind of watch the recording back afterwards too if they give you a recording. So think about that. Think about what are you setting up with the leaders and managers in terms of trust in virtual classroom as a really valuable, worthwhile time to be spent together learning. Secondly, your facilitators. Do they trust themselves to provide high quality learning experiences in virtual classrooms? And this is about two things: their confidence in virtual classroom environment with the technology, and their competence in using the software, but in also translating their great learning facilitation skills into this environment. There's a lot of work we can do with our facilitators to help them feel comfortable and confident in the virtual classroom. Quite often I talk to facilitators behind the scenes and say, how do you really feel about running virtual classrooms? It can be everything from terrified to, oh, I'm getting used to them, or I just have to do them, I don't like them, but I have to, right up to where people do feel like they love a virtual classroom, they love engaging that way, they love the variety of people that come through virtual classrooms. And then the final part of trust is about your learners. Do they trust the technology? Do they trust the facilitator? And do they trust other participants enough to enter the uncomfortable learning zone? Do they feel like they're in an intimate and trusted group of people when they're in the virtual classroom to share their challenges, their thoughts, their ideas? I can see Liz has given me a smiley face in the, thank you Liz, with a smiley face in the participant list there. That's lovely when people play with those emoticons. So feel free to do that. So yeah, trust in virtual classrooms is really important from all of those different perspectives, and a lot can be done to help your organisation build trust in the technology. So this is my bottom line really. Oh, and this one hasn't come out well, so I'll read it to you. Apologies for this. To be most effective, virtual classrooms should be driven by business or organisational need, by learner experience, and by measures of trust in this learning environment. So if your virtual classrooms are not effective, chances are you're doing something unskillfully, like preparing these slides, for example. I'm not testing them in the platform. I usually use a different VC platform that takes these slides, so apologies for this. Chances are you're doing something unskillfully, or there are key best practices that you might have missed. So there's a lot of work we can do in the background before just diving in, before actually choosing the technology and diving in. So questions or comments? Neil, did you want to guide the question time, or we can take questions in the chat panel?
I'm happy for the questions to come up in the chat panel, unless people are particularly wanting to dial in. I know Cassandra's keeping an eye on those who are dialing in, but otherwise, thank you, Cheryle. And what I think we do now is I'll talk for the next couple of minutes, but if you can jump into the chat box and just respond to any questions that come through there, that would be brilliant.
Certainly will.
I've put a list on the screen at the moment of some people to follow, and of course at the top of the list is Cheryle herself, and I've put the Twitter handles up there. One of the things for me in understanding any particular topic is finding the right people to listen to about that topic, and Cheryle was the first person that I've started listening to earlier this year around the topic, and she posted some great stuff. Cheryle herself put me onto Cindy Huggett, who's an American virtual classroom proponent, and Matthew Mason we actually do a fair bit of work with at AITD, and he's doing some interesting work. He's more at the design phase to see how do we actually translate our existing content into the current tools that we have, and he likes playing at the front edge of those tools in the actual virtual reality as well as virtual classroom. So there's 3 people. It's by no means an extensive list. It's not an endorsement by AITD of any of these people. It's just a starting point for people to kind of track a bit further and find some more resources. Just as we conclude, I want to remind any of you who are out there and are working in organisations who are doing some outstanding work that the AITD Excellence Awards have got 2.5 weeks left for you to work on your submission. The nominations close on the 28th of July. 8 different categories. If you know people who are working in organisations doing outstanding work, or if you know individuals who are doing outstanding work, then take a look at those awards. All of the details are on the AITD website at aitd.com.au. This webinar is part of the current national conversation on digital learning. If you're interested in getting a copy of the latest edition of the magazine, you can contact us at learn@aitd.com.au, and I'll happily post you out a copy of that magazine. And just a shameless plug that our e-learning masterclass is coming up starting on the 25th of July. It's a great course and very practical, gets you to actually start building some content in one of the e-learning platforms. A final shout out for Redback. As I said at the start, they just do a fabulous job providing a platform for us for hosting these digital events, webinars, webcasts, video conferencing. And in just a moment, the in-room survey will pop up on your screen, and that just gives you the opportunity to give some feedback on today's session, and please make sure you hit the orange submit button. And in there as well is a folder, a document folder, which will where you can complete the Redback report, where you give feedback about your digital event experiences. So I'd encourage you to get involved in doing that. And finally, thanks for joining us today. The chat room will remain open kind of for the next few minutes until it goes quiet, but keep an eye on the AITD newsletters and website for details of our future webinars, and have a great afternoon. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone. I'm frantically getting to your questions in the chat panel, so I'll attempt to answer those as many as I can. Thanks. Thanks, Neil.
You're welcome. Thank you, Cheryle. And as I said, the chat box will stay open for the next few minutes as Cheryle continues to answer questions there on the site. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Bye.